Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. We are on the murder list tonight and we're plotting revenge. I'm here with my Boldwood buddies, Diana Wilkinson, TJ Emerson, Gemma Rogers, and I am Diane Saxon. We're all going to tell you a little bit, introduce our books first of all, that are all either just out, brand new releases, or in Tracy Emerson's case, hers is out tomorrow. So congratulations on that, Tracy. Would you like to start?
I can start, yeah. I'm Tracy Emerson, TJ Emerson, and I released my first book with Boldwood last year, The Perfect Holiday. And my latest thriller is this one, The Ideal Man, and that is released, as Diana said, tomorrow. It's set in the south of France, and it tells a story of three women whose lives are changed forever when the one man who connects them all, Sandy Gilligan, is released from prison. And one of the women is his loyal daughter, Colette. The other woman is his girlfriend, Lynn. And then there's Jane, who's his former victim. So you have three women, and the shout line on the front of the book is one loves him, one needs him, one wants him dead. So it's very much a hook that it's a bit of a teaser for revenge, I think.
Brilliant, thank you. Gemma, you're up next.
My turn. Okay, so this is The Neighbour. It's my latest Boldwood release. It came out on the 5th of January. It's about a single mum, Shelley, who moves into this idyllic cul-de-sac. There's only 6 houses in there with her with her daughter Lauren. And she has a bit of an altercation on the day she moves in with her neighbour, who's not very friendly. And then she finds out, as things unfold, as she starts to get to know the people in the close, that the previous tenant of the house she's living in now has disappeared without a trace. And there's a few secrets, and she's not quite sure who she can trust and who's telling the truth. So that's my latest, The Neighbour.
Brilliant. Diana, tell us about yours.
Right, my latest book, which came out quite a week ago, is called One Down. When Amanda picks up a theme of murder woven through the crossword grid, she knows she's the target. Well, how does she know? Because the clues are personal. And also, her estranged husband, Nathan, is a cruciverbalist, a crossword puzzle setter, and he's toying with her from a distance. It's only when the clues become more sinister that Amanda starts to suspect somebody else might be involved, and somebody closer to home. My strap line, I have 2 strap lines to entice the reader. If you're hooked on Wordle, pick up One Down and let crosswords be your next fix. And the second one is if the Queen's Gambit made you buy a chess set, I'm hoping One Down will get you hooked on crosswords. So.
Brilliant, well done. And I'm Diane Saxon. My book also came out at the same time as Diana Wilkinson's, so don't get us mixed up. But mine is called My Sister's Secret. And this is 4 sisters, 4 secrets, but who has the deadliest of them all? And the bigger the secret, the deeper the lies. So mine is about an incident that happened when these 4 girls were youngsters, and something happens, and it's so horrible that the person it happens to says nothing, and it's their secret. But because they kept this secret, something even worse happened that's affected their family massively throughout their lives, and it's kind of molded each of the sisters in a different way. And so it's the unfolding, it's very much a domestic thriller of the unfolding of the secrets of those 4 sisters' lives, but one has a very deadly intent. There we go. So that's the way we've just started. So what we have also said is that we're giving away a book each tonight. So all anybody has to do this evening is to post a question. Now, the questions may get answered tonight. It depends on how many we have coming through. So please do post your questions, because even if they're not answered online tonight, if you've posted a question during the session, we will definitely be considering you for the prizes, and it will be one book from each of us from our new sets. So one of the things we all have in common is writing revenge. Gemma, where do you think that your desire for revenge comes from?
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. I think, well, I love revenge films. I'm a massive film buff. So I love films like Promising Young Woman, anything like that, especially where a woman's got revenge as well. I just find it fascinating. I love writing about it. I was reading Jane Fallon. She writes women's fiction, but it's always got a massive theme of revenge through it, and I absolutely adore it. And I wanted to kind of put that in my books because it's so gratifying. I mean, everyone loves writing a villain, but what's even better than writing a villain is writing their comeuppance, isn't it? So I love it. Absolutely love it. How about you?
Me, see, I don't see mine as revenge. Mine as justice, which is a little bit worrying. So I love these films and books that actually involve that sort of intent. That how far would you actually go to protect your loved one? I mean, most women, if you ask them if they've got children, if you ask them what would you do to protect that child, they would lay their life down for them. And I really, really feel that most women would do that for their children, but how many would kill for them? And that's quite often my question is how many people would actually kill to protect? So there you go. Diana, what about you?
With revenge, I think in life there's always one or more people you really want to say what you really think. If they've had a go at you or they've done something bad to you, you really want to answer them. And yet we know not to. When we get bad reviews for our books and they're not fair, yes, if they don't like the book, fine, but if they're not nice, we want to take revenge. We want to answer, but you don't. We're told not to. That's why I love writing about revenge, because I can do it in a book. And that gets the message across. So I don't, in real life, although when I talk about revenge, I wouldn't smash them over the head with a baseball bat, but in the book I do.
How about you, TJ? Do you feel like smashing anybody over the head with a baseball bat?
Oh, there's been times. I think I agree with all of the things that you said. Like Gemma said, there is a real satisfaction in being able to do on the page in a way to get that retribution that you don't often get in real life. And it is that fine line as well between revenge and justice. Because I think I also see a lot of what happens in my stories as people getting justice or exacting with justice that they haven't got in real life. And one thing I would say is that when you're actually writing, someone who is driven by revenge is a real gift for you as a writer, because they've got a goal. They're very driven. You know where they're going. So actually, in order to generate plot and story, it's also fantastic in that way as well, I think, as a tool.
We've got some lovely questions coming in, actually. And I'm going to ask the first one from Valerie Keogh. What genre would you all never write? Gemma?
I think I would be rubbish at romance. I absolutely love to read it. but I think I would be really clunky. I don't think it would be very smooth at all.
Now, you see, I actually have written romance. I've got 12. I've written 12 cowboy romances, really, for the US market. And I love writing romance. However, I was actually asked to write romances with more than one partner. And I actually felt uncomfortable with that, mainly because I wouldn't have no idea where all the body parts went. What about you, Diana?
Well, I would certainly never write sci-fi, and I'm not a fan of horror. I don't watch sci-fi movies. I couldn't write it. I would no idea. And I'm laughing because my new book, One Down, is high up in the fantasy charts, new releases. It was number 3 for a while, and above it were 2 hunky, bare-chested men on the covers. I'm thinking, you know what? People aren't going to buy my book if they see those hunky men.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to write fantasy and sci-fi or horror. Not for me. I love romantic.
I write those as well. I write sci-fi in my romances, and I write obviously sci-fi romance. I don't write horror, but some of my books push the boundaries a little bit. But I love to read horror. I mean, I love a good Stephen King. Who doesn't really, you know? But
that's scary.
What about you, Tracy?
I wish I could, but I don't think I could write a really good feel-good story with loads of nice people in it. Like, I really wish I could sometimes, because writing things with quite dark, disturbed people in them. Do you think I'd quite like a break from that? But I just don't think I could do it. I don't think it would be me.
I think that's one of the reasons that I moved into thriller writing as well, is because my romances aren't light and fluffy. They are quite, there's a dark element to each one of them, actually. So really, I got to a point where somebody said to me, don't make this a romance. And that was my first crime thriller, which was Find Her Alive. So that was actually one of the things that I found myself writing, was just sliding over into the thriller. So here's another question. If you could play a role in a book, who would you be and why? And this comes from Vic Dolan.
Oh, I know. I've got one for that. I would definitely be Lisbeth Salander from the Stieg Larsson Millennium series. Definitely. She's smart and spiky and a real kind of anti-heroine. Fantastic character. That would be mine.
Excellent. Tracy, what about you?
I'd quite like to be a Patricia Highsmith baddie, actually, just to see what that was like. You know, I could be Tom Ripley for a little while or something like that, just to kind of, you know, swan around Europe doing bad things just for a little while.
And Diana?
Well, I think my favourite book, if I think of all time, the first book I really devoured was Gone with the Wind. So I would love to be Scarlett O'Hara. I thought in my younger days, you know, but, you know, looking back in my mind, I would still love to be Scarlett O'Hara.
And I think for me, well, it's got to be Catwoman. Catwoman. I just wish I was that live and energetic these days. But yeah, she's always in her many formats. I've always admired her. So I'm going to vote for Catwoman. There's a question here specifically for TJ, for Tracy, from Natalie Peake. What can your readers expect from 2023?
In terms of my writing, do you mean that would be, well, it would be The Ideal Man. And so basically more dark, twisty stories. It's definitely one of those. And I'm also really, I love reading novels where you've got a really gripping page-turning story, but it's dealing with social issues and different things like that. And I think The Ideal Man does that to some extent. So yeah, if you're looking for dark and disturbing and social issues, I can promise you that in 2023 with The Ideal Man.
Excellent. So here's a quick one. You can either answer yes or no, or you can go into detail if you want. This is from Sally. Have any of you ever carried out an act of revenge in real life? And I'm going to answer that first. No.
No, not brave.
Certainly not that I don't up to.
No, I don't think so.
We're all such ladies. We wouldn't do that. We'd just kill them off in a book.
Yes.
Well, we're too clever at hiding the bodies. That's the truth.
That's what it is. And here's a question from Mary. What do you find to be the best and hardest part of the writing process? The best and hardest part of the writing process. Diana, would you like to go first?
Certainly the best part for me is the writing. I absolutely love the writing. I love in my own world, sitting there. Everything else I struggle with. I've got a wonderful editor, Emily, who's absolutely fabulous. But editing is so tough because I've never done it before. So learning that is really tough. But I think the very worst part for all the writers, I don't know if you're the same, you're maybe more seasoned than I am, is the review process. When I get one bad review, I might have 10 brilliant reviews. That one bad one really bugs me and I get so upset. It's very upsetting. And maybe that's just me. And people say, stop looking. But it's very hard. I think if you want to give somebody a poor review, that's fine. I don't want 5 stars. I'm happy with a 1 star if it's a genuine opinion. So I find that tough. I'm happy with genuine opinions that I can take from and learn. And I do learn, and I do read them all. So that's for me.
TJ, Tracy.
I think probably each part of the process, I think, has its kind of good bits and its bad bits. I think starting a first draft is hard because, and in fact, I was watching an interview with Joyce Carol Oates the other day, and she said, I hate the first 6 to 8 weeks where I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm quite uncomfortable. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it. And I think I can really relate to that. Then it starts to pick up a little bit. And one of the best parts of the process is just finishing that first draft because you know you've got to do it. You know you've got to get it done, however bad it is. And so that for me is always a real relief because I actually quite like the editing and the rewriting process. And I know if I've got something down, I can do something with it, but I have to get it down first. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Mm.
What about you, Gemma?
I'm probably the opposite, actually. I love having a blank page. I love starting something new where my mind just can do whatever it wants. That's the best bit for me. I think editing is probably, I hate editing.
For me, I actually love the whole process. I love the writing, and I go out on dog walks. I'm renowned for this. I go out on a dog walk and I come back with a whole scene in my mind, and it goes down lovely and smoothly. My hardest part is, and I am really disciplined at writing, but and this is the case now. I've got a deadline looming, and I suddenly go, oh my God, I've got to write something. And it's all there in my head. And I do it every single time. I get to the sort of deadline looming up, 6 weeks ahead, something bad happens or, something distracting happens. Away I go for 3 weeks on, whatever has to happen and find myself with 30,000 words to write and 2 weeks in which to write it. This is, not unusual for me, but I hate that side of things is because I know that if I just sat down and wrote it at the very beginning of that 6 months that I allocate myself, I'd have it done within 2 months. So that's the bit that I find the hardest is arguing with myself. So moving on from there, question from Pam, do you write gruesome detail in your books?
Yes.
Yeah, I've read a lot of Gemma's now. I love Gemma's book. I'm a big fan of hers. Gemma does.
Yeah, no holds barred in mine. No. Mine, I think it's because I love horror so much that I'm probably always trying to edge a little bit in. So yeah, as much as I can get away with, I will.
Yeah. What about you, Diana?
I try. I think mine are more psychological. I always have the gruesome murder. There's the baseball bat, the knife, the artery. It's like, but that's thrown in a bit of graphic detail, and then generally in the prologue. But then I try and think of my writing as more psychological thrillers. That's what I would aim for. Doesn't always pull it off, but that's the aim. I still, sadly, go back to Gone Girl as my benchmark of trying to write in the psychological manner. Obviously, I'd never hit the heights of Gillian Flynn, unbelievable, but that was where I started, and I find I'm only now trying to move away from that to get more horror in. I've become a massive fan of Freda McFadden, which is another thing. And reading her books has made me realize the genre that I've started writing in, of Gillian Flynn, Girl on the Train, has changed dramatically. Into shorter, faster moving, quicker sentences, keeping people instantly involved without the graphic detail. So, but Freda McFadden does put in very gruesome stuff. Very gruesome.
I actually find with mine, with any psychological thriller, I can write some very sort of gruesome detail in my baseball bat, whatever. I can write that gruesome detail in. And it's funny how people, because it's psychological, people actually pick up on what affects them. So you'll get people in their reviews going, trigger alert. Well, it's not a trigger alert for most people. But it's for them, specifically for them, and that's where it's always difficult, where they put in a trigger alert. I had one lady say to me face to face, well, you're just sick, you're sick. That book, and she told me a bit about my book, and I thought, but I didn't write that, but your imagination put it there. And that's the whole point of psychological. And when people pick up a psychological book and say it should have a trigger warning, well, that's for them, not necessarily us. Each psychological book pulls at those psychological strings for each individual. What about you, Tracy? I can see you nodding there.
I think, I kind of agree with you with that kind of psychological, leaving room for the reader there. That's what I tend to do writing wise. When I'm reading, I love gruesome detail and I really enjoy it. I'm a big horror fan as well. But I just tend not to do, it's just not me, I don't think, within what I'm writing at the moment. But it's interesting that you mention the different genres, because I think when you write for a while in the same genre, you do maybe start to bring other things in. So the thing that I'm plotting at the moment, I'm thinking there is a slight horror element to this, not in a gory way, but definitely in a psychological way of just thinking, how you kind of get that creepy tension and how you do that. So I do think there's room for that genre blending, which I really love. And I think Gillian, because I really love sci-fi as well, and I think like Gillian McAllister had a novel out recently, which was kind of a kind of crime novel, but mixed with kind of some time travel or something else. And there's a lot more freedom starting to come about. I think people are just taking elements now from different genres and putting them together. And I think that's really exciting.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the next one from Sue. Question from Sue. I'm noticing more and more female crime writers. What do you think? Why do you think this is?
I don't know.
Does anybody? So I actually think that there's an awful lot of series on TV that has been written by female writers, actually, and that's not just a recent event. You look at sort of Joy Ellis. She's been writing for years, and I'm not sure whether there are more, or there's just generally more writers out there, and maybe people are picking up more female writers, because we do tend to write a little more detail into our manuscripts, I think. What about you, Gemma?
I don't really know. I wouldn't like to say whether there's more or not, to be quite honest. I mean, I guess a lot of the time when people use initials, you don't necessarily know whether you're reading a man or a woman, do you? And I mean, I mean, it wouldn't bother me either way. I wouldn't not pick up a book because it was written by a man. Absolutely not. So I don't know. It's a good question, but I really don't know.
I think, I mean, obviously we've got an all-female panel here, but that doesn't mean so much that we're writing crime more. It means that we would have revenge more.
Does that time with what Gemma said earlier about like it's very satisfying as a woman to write those kind of stories about women taking back power or kind of enacting power when they're maybe not, you know, having that in real life. So maybe there's a bit of a connection there that those stories from those kind of points of view are resonating with people. So there's more women writing them. I don't know.
I mean, the likes of Val McDermott and so on have been writing for years. So maybe they empower us to write as well. But I've never really balanced it up between men and female. I just read what I like to read. What do you think, Diana?
I feel in a way that certainly my books, not speaking for yours, are generally more popular with the female writers. I don't appeal to male writers at all, because this, when we come back to the reviewing, male writers. And I do feel that maybe the male readership is not so interested in psychological revenge stuff. I think maybe they're a little bit scared of us women, but I shouldn't say that, should I? But there's certainly the men writers, the male writers write very differently, I think, to female writers. That's a generalization, but certainly for me, if I go into the bookshop or the bookstore and I'm looking through, I would want to read a thriller, and I would home in on the female writers.
Okay.
That's just me.
I think maybe I shouldn't say this as well, but there's a really good, you know, Marion Key, it always says brilliant things. And like when I was younger, I used to read predominantly books by men. Now I read mostly books by women. And Marion Key says, you know, she says, I don't need to read men's books to find out what they've got to say. I've grown up hearing it all my life. I want to read women's books and hear what they've got to say, you know.
I will just interject there, because we have a fantastic Boldwood buddy who I read all of his books, love them, and that's Ross Greenwood. And if you listen to him on audio, not him obviously on audio, but his narrator is just brilliant. And I love Ross Greenwood's books. Only discovered him since I joined Boldwood, so he was one of my discoveries. And I actually think it wouldn't matter what the name on the cover was, I would read him. He's very good, very talented. Question for Gemma from Tracy: would you ever consider writing Gangland?
I love Gangland, I really do, but I just don't want to write a series. I love the fact that, as I said before, when I've got a blank page and it's a completely new story with new characters, it keeps it really fresh for me. And I love just creating a completely different world every single time. I think I'd have to really love a character to want to go back. But yeah, I mean, I love the gritty, as you'll know if you've read any of my books, they are quite gritty and quite dark. So I do love Gangland, and I've read a lot of Gangland as well, but I don't think I would write a series. No, not yet. I mean, never say never, but no, not at the moment.
I think, I mean, as you know, I'm a fan of yours, Gemma, anyway. Love reading your books. I always think that they are they're very normal people.
Yeah.
As opposed to not quite Gangland.
Yeah.
But they are normal people living normal lives, and you know, some of them going through really rough, tough times. So I understand that they're very real. Your people, your characters are very real. So, but you're not interested in a series?
No, I just don't think. Like I said, I'd have to really love a character. Like if I could write a character like Lisbeth, who I mentioned earlier. I mean, yeah, I'd come back to that again and again and again. But I do love just finishing a book, writing the end, and then moving on and starting something completely different.
Brilliant. Question from hang on a moment, I missed a question by mistake. Question from Debbie: how did you all get into writing? We're going to start with Diana.
Well, my all my business working life was as a tennis coach, and I ran tennis as a business. I was a professional tennis player. And really, when my back started really giving jip, I thought I've got to do something else because I have to work. So although I'm still playing tennis, local, club competitive stuff, once I stepped off the court, I had to do something. And I just thought, you know what, let's have a go. I coached ladies mornings for many years, hundreds of ladies. And we did an hour's tennis. And after the hour's tennis, we'd go inside the clubhouse and have coffee for 3 hours. And these ladies, most fabulous women, I take my hats off to all of them. They had so many stories and all sorts of revenge stories. They never shared a murder story, but I got all my inspiration. Well, they never shared it. They may have been one. But through that, I thought, you know what? Maybe I can put this down on paper. So that's for me.
Wow, good for you. I noticed Debbie Newey actually says she's due to take an English exam next week at the age of 53, sixth time lucky. So exams are not for me. You know, we all do exams. I hate them. I tend to freeze. Writing a book is nothing like an exam. I actually had a foot operation when I wrote my first book, and it was the cowboy romance called Loving Lydia, and I had a foot operation, and I just started to write something dark and deep, which actually then transpired to be Find Her Alive later on in life. But my first book I wrote, and I hadn't really any intention, but I had 2 weeks that I wasn't allowed to move. I had my foot up, I wasn't allowed to move, and I wrote my book in 2 weeks. That first book. And that was 50,000 words. Obviously, once it was edited and so on, it was a little bit different, but 50,000 words in 2 weeks, and that's how I started writing. What about you, Tracy?
It's a bit of a kind of circuitous route, really. Like as a kid, I always read a lot, and I really loved writing stories, and then just got into other things at school and went off on other tracks. And I did a drama degree. Sort of worked in theatre and community arts for a long time. Had a bit of ill health in sort of my late 20s, early 30s, and I wasn't sort of doing any theatre stuff or anything like that. And my best friend said to me, "Why don't you try some writing as a creative outlet?" So I kind of got into that, and I did some like day and evening classes at Edinburgh University, and then I went on and I did my master's there. So that was really, you know, it was kind of a long route, but that's kind of I sort of got there eventually. Yeah.
Interesting.
Well done. And Gemma?
I think, like Tracy said, I read everything I could get my hands on as a kid, absolutely loved it, lived in my own head, lived in my own world. I wrote a little bit of fan fiction for like the following on from movies that I'd seen that I'd loved. And then I didn't write my first book until 2016. I'd started loads, but I hadn't been able to finish anything. I just couldn't get past sort of 30,000 words. And then I think I'm not quite sure what happened in 2016 that made me just sit down and think, right, I'm just going to do it. So I did. And I remember getting to sort of 90,000 words and was just, I don't think I've ever matched that level of elation until I got published, I guess. Just being able to finish something was amazing. Best thing in the world. But I've been writing ever since I was a kid, really.
Amazing. I'm still practicing though.
Always.
Oh, here's an interesting question. And I'm going to answer it first. Would you ever write about a serial killer who keeps getting away with it?
It sounds like Happy Valley.
You have to read my books to know that. Just going to say that, otherwise it could be a spoiler. Gemma, we'll bounce straight back to you.
Oh, definitely. That sounds really interesting. I suppose, although that then sounds like a series, doesn't it? Which I've already said I wouldn't. But that sounds. I'm always up for a villain getting away with it. In fact, I've had to change a couple of endings because they haven't been happy enough. So.
We don't need a happy ending every time, though, do we?
Overrated.
Agreed.
Tracy, what about you? Would you like to write about a serial killer who keeps getting away with it?
I think that would be great. Yeah, a part of me would love to do that. You know, I really loved all the series like Dexter, big Dexter fan. You know, it's really interesting that fine line and where you want them to get away with it. You know they're bad, but you identify with them, or like a Tom Ripley or something like that. So I think that would be like immense fun to do. But I think I'd have to find my own way into it. Don't you? Got to find it's a character. Why are they different from other serial killers? What's going to be interesting about them? And how do you do it without making them a cliche and all that sort of stuff? But, yeah,
It's a borderline, isn't it, between serial killer and vigilante?
exactly.
You know, what is actually right?
Yeah, definitely. And playing sort of moral choice, which something like Dexter does brilliantly.
Absolutely, I agree. Love Dexter. What about you, Diana? Would you like to have a serial killer?
Well, in my next book, which was published before, which is coming out in March, called Right Behind You, the anti-hero is a real piece of work. She's fabulous, and she does get away with it. I won't say any more in case you read it, but people say there should be a sequel to it, because she's slightly like, you love her. She's an anti-hero. You love her, but she's absolutely, what she's done is dreadful. But if you understand why she's done it, then you sort of you're rooting for her. I was rooting for her. I'm still rooting for her. You know, so I think that's the thing. And then, although when you look at Happy Valley and that awful character who's fabulous, I'm so addicted to it. Awful guy who's murdered so many times, you really don't want him to get away with it. So there's a big difference in trying to get empathy for your serial killer character.
It is that balance with empathy, isn't it? And what the general public would actually approve of. Here's a really interesting question from Donna, and I bet this is Donna Morford. If you were to cast each other as killers in one another's books, how would you have them kill their victims?
Oh gosh, that's a good one.
If that's, I can almost guarantee that's Donna Morford. Yes, it is. So Donna is my great go-to for anything forensic. We've had some very, very interesting conversations, including talking about how do you defrost a child-sized turkey. Go there. So Donna will ask very interesting questions. So how would you have them kill your victims? Diana, how would you like one of us to be in your book and kill your victim?
I wouldn't want to kill any of you. I'm a bit confused by this question.
You're going to make us the killer in your book, but how would we kill our victims?
How would you kill the victims? Well, I need to read all your books. I'm putting my hands up here, and that I'm not there yet. I've got so many things to read. How would you have it kill the victims? Well, all I can think of is how I kill my victims in my books, and therefore I could only translate that into one of you doing similar. Mine's baseball bat, very boring. Twice, 2 of my books has been baseball bat, for the want of having a more greater imagination. So I'll probably just have to say baseball bat.
I'm going to say that if I featured Gemma in one of my books, I think she would lock somebody in an underground cave.
Oh, heck. I'm not coming to your house, Gemma.
Yeah. You know where that door leads to, Diana?
No, that's what I was thinking.
I was just thinking, actually, Diane, that I think I would have you strangle someone with one of your dog leads.
Going down the dog road as well. I was. Would it be the Dalmatian would be there in the background?
Yes.
Yeah. Somehow
help.
So that's kind of featured a bit in my in Find Her Alive, which is Find Her Alive is part of my crime series.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
Procedural, and it's got a Dalmatian in it, and one of the scenes does have the protagonist actually strangling a victim with the dog lead. And I've had so many people write to me and say, I have never, since you put that she wrapped a dog lead around her neck while the dog was off running free. So many women no longer do that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Tracy, who would you have?
Well, I think it would be you with some kind of dog thing. Like I said, I'm just, the Dalmatian. It would be like your accomplice, a bit like, I don't know, like an Oliver Twist or Bullseye or something,
This will be your next book, Tracy. I can see.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of ticking over now.
Yes, I can see. This is a good one.
She's going to name me in it as well, isn't she? Here's a question from Sue. Would any of you write cozy crime?
I wouldn't have a clue where to start. I must be honest.
We've all gone.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really interesting, like what actually cozy crime is, and I don't know if I'm totally sure, because I think the definitions really vary. And some of the, I was watching an old episode of Midsomer Murders last night, because if I want to switch off sometimes, I'll watch Midsomer Murders, and that could probably be considered like cozy crime. But the actual things that happen are really horrible.
Yeah. There's nothing cozy about, some of them where they're found hanging or, decapitated or whatever. I don't think they're that cozy. I'm not sure I could write cozy crime, because cozy crime, I feel, is always based on really nice people doing really awful things, and kind of, then it's sort of getting bigger and bigger. Whereas I actually like to have somebody who's quite vicious in my books. I like to have that psychological element of, I think I would really struggle to write cozy crime. It would start off as cozy crime, and then it would be, it would all end very nastily. What about you, Diana? Could you write cozy crime?
I think the problem is for me is that I don't watch cozy crime TV. I'm not into cozy crime books, and I find that it's easier to write what you enjoy. I enjoy psychological thrillers, a bit gruesome. As I said, a big fan now of Freda McFadden. Actually, a bit sort of, I'm in the cult of Freda McFadden. It's quite bizarre. I'm trying to learn. If you want something, it's so not cozy crime. It's so horrendous. The endings are just really gruesome, but it's riveting. So cozy crime is not for me. I couldn't do it.
And Gemma? Oh, you already said you didn't.
Yeah, I don't know where to start now.
No, we're definitely psychological girls, aren't we?
Yes.
Question from Tracy. If you write about dark, disturbed people, how do you get over the story?
Sorry, how do you
get over that story?
Where is that?
I write it. That's what gets it out. If you're writing in a deep, dark place, how do you get over that sort of deep, dark thoughts? Well, I just that's what gets me over it. I have these thoughts, I write them down, and it's gone. Then, to me.
Moving to the next dark, disturbing thought.
I end up having nightmares about the deep, dark, disturbed people I write about, and they sort of morph with reality. That's really scary. At 3 a.m, you think, oh.
You have to get up and write, because that is your best time, isn't it? When they're really, as you say, they've morphed into reality, and they're there so heavy in your mind that you have to race downstairs. Well, I race downstairs at 3 o'clock in the morning, switch on my computer, and I start writing, because that's when they're at their strongest, and your mind's sort of really got it all formed. If you wait till the morning, you wake up and go, oh, what was that? A bit like a dream, isn't it? It's gone.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't have a problem getting over it. I'm obviously heartless.
I always think that I don't, that it doesn't, I can sit down and write some quite disturbing things and it doesn't bother me, but then the people that I live with would disagree with that, in some way.
Looking at you in a different way. They look at you and think, oh my God, you wrote that.
Exactly. And it probably does affect you on some level. But when I was writing The Ideal Man, there was one bit building up towards the climax. And for some reason, I wanted to get it written and I wanted to get it done, but I was really kind of struggling. And once I'd done it, I was like, I'm really glad I've done that, because I actually don't think I knew it had to be done that way. And I don't think I wanted to do it. It wasn't something I wanted to admit it was possible for somebody to do. So I was like, and even when I went back and I was editing and rewriting, every time it came up to it, I'd be like, got to get through that, got to do it, and then be out the other side. So it was interesting.
And yet there's sometimes some of the scenes that I really enjoy the most. There's a very dark scene in My Little Brother that I wrote. And when I was writing it, I was just so there. And every time I went to edit it, I didn't need to edit it any further, because it was actually right from that moment. And I just really absorbed this whole scene. I loved it. I still love it. I could read it again. And it's quite a scene in the book where people come back to me and say, wow, that scene, how did you write that? People during COVID rang my husband up to make sure he was okay. So here's a question from Craig. Craig Gillen says, where do you get ideas for characters from? Do you ever base them on people you've come across in real life? And I'm going to quickly whiz in there and say that Craig Gillen won a little competition and had his mum named in my book. And she's a mature lady, shall we say. So I made her into a barmaid, a tattooed barmaid, who was very bouncy and very full of life. And apparently she loved it. But obviously I only had the name, and I personally don't base any of my characters on real people, but I can pick up one trait from a person and develop it. What about you, Gemma?
I would say exactly the same. You come across so many people, and you can pick and choose. It's little quirks that they have, things that they do, their mannerisms, and yeah, I like to sort of put them all in the pot and see what comes out.
Yeah. Tracy?
Yeah, I would have sort of a similar approach to Gemma. I would also say that I do have a whole, like most people, I've had the sort of, misfortune or fortune to meet some really like dysfunctional people in my life. and so I do have like a list of a gallery of rogues there that I can kind of pull things from, but it might be a trait, and I might think, okay, who can I latch onto here? I've got a character who's like this. Oh, I remember them and they were a bit like that. But something I learned on a writing course, and I think it's true, is that if you go too far for somebody that's from real life, like totally rip it off, I think that's fine for secondary characters, but for main characters, I think you can end up getting a bit stuck. Whereas if you change something about them, their gender or something else, and bring in a few other things, they'll live a bit more. I think if you go too full on for a main character, it doesn't work.
I agree. What about you, Diana?
Well, I do laugh at the start of every book. There's the disclaimer. None of these people are real. They're all fictional, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking that's a load of crap, because basically every character I write about has got a bit from her, him, her. And you pick, because strong characters are people who've had a strong influence on your life. So you take a little bit from everybody. So there's not one character, but they're all based on people I know.
I'm sticking with my disclaimer.
There was a great book called Disclaimer, if you haven't read it years ago. I loved it. Yeah.
Here's a question that probably all of us get asked a lot, from Mary. Do you have any tips for people who would like to write? I do. Sit down, write it.
That would be mine too.
If you're going to write it. Don't talk about it, write it. I'm quite harsh. I've been approached by people who go, so once you've written your book, how do you get published? And I say, well, have you written your book? And they say, no. Well, that's your first step to getting published. Write your book. So I'm a little bit tough on that because, as we all know, all four of us pour our heart and soul into writing a book every single time. And we, it's not easy work. We do slave away at that keyboard for hours and hours and hours. And then somebody will say to you, well, what do I have to do to write a book? Well, you have to write it. Pour your heart and soul into it. What about?
It's great to have, like you say, the dog walks, the swimming for me. Sometimes you have your plotting time, don't you? And you're, generating ideas. But ultimately, you've got to get words down on the page, and that takes time. And you've got to set aside time out of your busy life, as we all do, to be able to do that. So I don't think it's mean to say sit down and write. You physically have to sit down in front of a laptop or computer or typewriter or even pen and paper and write it. So yeah, I would agree.
Sometimes people say to me, oh, well, how do you find the time? But then you find out that they've just watched, binge watched 12 episodes of, their favourite. And you go, well, actually, the binge watching has to go sometimes. What about you, Tracy?
I think it's a combination of those things. Like in the end, it is you sitting down and doing it, definitely. But I've also benefited from being part of writing communities as I've been developing my writing. So when I was doing like some courses at Edinburgh Uni, I was kind of meeting people for the first time. I was kind of meeting mentors, all that sort of stuff. I found that really useful. And now you've got a lot of really good like online writing schools and communities. And, I've done some of the courses at the Novelry. They've been great. And I really benefit from that because I come originally from a very collaborative artistic background. And when you're kind of writing, it's you that's kind of doing it. Also, your editor has a lot of input and all that sort of stuff. So, I think it's a combination. In the end, only you can do it, but you can also kind of join things, go to classes, do stuff and because also I think a lot of people think, oh, it's just easy. I'm just going to like do this thing. But there's a lot of things about craft that you can learn that you might not know. And, so it depends what kind of person you are and what you need, I think.
Yeah. Diana, what about you?
Well, one thing, a tip that I would give to anybody who wants to start is I had an editor at my previous publisher, and she does a little Instagram post every Wednesday, and this is Word Count Wednesday. Marvelous editor she was. And she says, have you done your 300 words today? She says, if you want to write, you have to at least do 300 words. Just do it. Don't talk about it. Do 300 words a day. And that soon becomes a book. And I think that is the small steps become the big picture. It's actually having the discipline to do something small. 300 words is easy for anybody.
Yeah.
Because it's psychological, isn't it? It's psychological a lot of the time. You've got to get over your own fear of failure, your own, I've start again and this, that, and the other. And so all those things and all the tips get you over the lines that you can do that. I mean, I wrote sort of 500 rough words of something yesterday because I thought, I need to start. And no, I don't know what I'm doing yet. But if I don't come to the page, it's going to be lost. I have to do something.
You can't edit nothing. You can edit 500 really badly written words, but you can't edit nothing.
I often do, I do sprints, and I do them with other authors. I say, are you sprinting today? And online we go, right, okay, we're going to start at 10 a.m, get your cup of coffee ready by your side. We're going to do an hour. And one author, I won't name her, but one author I know said, I haven't written anything for weeks and weeks. I don't know what I'm doing. And I said, come along, join in. If you want to sprint with me, we'll sprint. That's great. Any author, I'm quite happy to do that with anybody. But I'm really tough. I say you switch off all social media, and you sit and you write for an hour. If you want to then get up for a quarter of an hour, go and put your washing in, get another cup of coffee, whatever, which is normally what I do, that's great. Then you have your 15 minutes break. And this lady came on board and she sort of went, oh, right, okay, I've not written for such a long time. And then she suddenly went, oh, I've just written 842 words in an hour.
It's amazing what you can do with an hour. You know, if it's a focused hour and you can just get over yourself and sit down for an hour, it is quite surprising what you can do.
And we all do it. We're all guilty of becoming distracted, aren't we? Mm-hmm. So here's a question from Jessica. Do you have a favourite book out of all the ones you've written? Gemma, favourite book?
That's a tough one. I think my favourite one is always my latest one, actually. Although my very first one, Stalker, does hold a very special place in my heart. But because it was a little bit or sort of based on an incident that was, you know, true to life. I think that's quite special to me. But normally my latest one's always my favourite until the next time.
What about you, Diana?
Well, I always think that books are like children. You have a baby and your first one is so exciting and so marvelous, and then you go on to another one and another one, and you can't have a favourite. Each one has something special about them, and they're like your babies. You're very protective. If somebody criticises one, you're thinking, hang on, well, what was wrong with that one? And these ones don't have that problem. So I think they're like children. You love them all. And I wouldn't like to say which I preferred.
Tracy, do you have a favourite of yours?
I think I'm a bit like Gemma, like I want to love the thing that I'm working on, and to do that, that's definitely true. That said, The Perfect Holiday, which came out last year, which was my second book, but my first book for Boldwood, that's got special meaning because I think I found that second novel really hard to write for lots of reasons. There was just so much going on in my life, just different things. And to actually finish a second novel, and I looked at it and I thought, you know, it's better than my first novel. And that was a real sense of pride. And I thought, okay, I've learned something here, I've developed. And so I'm very, I've got a big place in my heart for that novel as well. But I also, you know, I'm really proud of what I've just written too. So, yeah.
Right, I'm aware that we've got 3 minutes left. So we're just going to see if we can do a quick fire couple of questions. Question from Phil: do your books come out fully formed, or do you write bits and go back and knit things together? For me, in my head, my book is fully formed, more or less, but I always knit things together. Quick answer there. Tracy?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a knitter. I have to do more plotting now that I'm writing under contract with deadlines and stuff, because normally I'm a bit of a pantser. So I will have some kind of like vague shape, but I do knit.
Gemma?
Definitely a pantster. I normally have an ending and a vague idea where it's going, and then I just see how I go.
Diana, do you plot or do you pantster?
I'm a pantster. No, I go all the way through with an idea of who the murderer is, and then I think the reader, 3/4 of the way through, will be much more excited if I can twist it now. So I twist myself. I said, how can I now? I've dragged the reader along, so this person, they'll think, haha, that's who did it. And then I have to work for myself to think, how can I twist this now so it's not them? But I just...
Really good idea.
My editor says, you're joking me. I wouldn't like when I say that, but that's the way I do it. I just sit down and write and just see where it goes.
Yeah. So is a plot twist, this is my own question, is a plot twist essential in all of your books, Gemma?
No. No, I don't think so.
Tracy?
I think if you've got a great plot twist and it's authentic and it works in the thing, I think that's brilliant. It isn't always possible. A great psychological suspense is where the situation is interesting and you just watch the situation develop. I love that. The Ideal Man, for the first time ever, actually started with a twist, which I've never done before, had this idea for a twist and built around it. So I think it's different every novel, and it's not essential for me as a reader or a writer.
Yeah. And Diana, do you think a plot twist is the thing? Sounds like you did then.
Well, I think, yes. I mean, I think basically I'm studying Freda McFadden as if I'm doing a degree. I've mentioned her name so many times. There's nothing in this for her. I'm just doing it because I've obsessed.
I hope you get commission off tonight.
I think I'll get on. She's got this group, this cult following, which is unbelievable. I'm on the group. She's got 10,000 people. And it's like, it's quite bizarre. I've never read anybody. She's written about 30 books. She's also a brain surgeon, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the whole story goes on. But every book, as a writer, we're all very astute, and readers are astute. They always think, I know what's going to happen. I know idea what's going to happen with hers. I get through. And if you read The Housemaid, which has been her blockbuster thing, I'm sorry if you haven't read it. You'll lie if you tell me you work out what's happened. I would love to do that, but I'm not. I haven't got that skill yet, but I'm trying to understand what it makes to have that jaw-dropping twist.
Okay, right, we're going to have to say goodbye to everybody now because our time is up and it has flown past. And I've just noticed as I've scrolled down, I'm being told 5 minutes to go, ready to wrap up. Let's go. And ladies, it was a pleasure talking with you tonight. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you all for your questions, and we'll have to wrap up now. So thank you and good night.
Thank you, everybody.